episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
And also by my favorite chair ever. Oh my goodness, Connected Yoga Teachers. I need to tell you that I am the proud new owner of a Sukhasana chair. This is a Canadian-made chair that is like a dream to sit on. It has made such a difference in my posture. And I have to tell you, this is a company run by a Canadian man named Carl. Shout out to Carl, who literally gave me a call 2 weeks after I had ordered the chair. So I had the chair for about a week and a half, and I was trying it out. And Carl gave me a call and walked me through some different ways on how to use the chair. This is extreme customer service, and I'm so glad he did, because he actually explained how we really get conditioned as humans, sitting in chairs a lot, to use the chair, to really lean into the chair. And the Sukhasana chair is designed to get you away from that and to allow you to sit however you're comfortable. Maybe that's cross-legged or half cross-legged, hence the name Sukhasana, which I love to do anyway. And it's almost like it brings the floor up to the level that you need for your desk. So I have been sitting on this chair now for weeks. I shared about it in an Instagram post, and I have gotten a ton of questions since then. And I'm really excited to tell you about it if you're looking for a chair that really enables you to sit in a comfortable way that really strengthens your core and also encourages you to move around in different positions as you sit at your desk. So I'm just really excited about this chair, as you can tell. If you want to check it out, go to sukhasana.com. I'll make sure that we link to it in our show notes. So hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow, a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. And this podcast was created for you so that you can connect to the information and inspiration each and every week as you navigate what it's like to be a business owner and a yoga teacher, because that's what you are. And sometimes, I know personally, in my 200 hour, I was not really thinking about being a business owner. I was really thinking about being a yoga teacher. This episode is a really special one. We're celebrating 200 episodes of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. And it's thanks to you that this podcast even exists. I want to be really honest about what it's like to record episode 200. I mean, it's a bit surreal. It's a bit wild to think of the journey. I just went to our master document that lists all of the guests and topics, and it's amazing what happens when you decide, okay, each and every week we're going to do this and to keep going with that. It's amazing how far we've come. And also the part that I want to be honest about is this has been an episode that's been hard to hit record on for the intro and outro. Also, the interview was a bit intimidating because I interviewed 2 people who I've wanted to talk to for a long time. Lizzie and Judith were on my dream podcast guest list long ago. There's a reason why I want to share this with you, this fact that it was hard to hit record on this episode, and it's because if you're like me in any point in your business where your perfectionism starts to come in and tell you, oh no, you have to get this right and this right and this right before you do it. Like, let's say you want to create a video for your social media to showcase your specialty. And you think, well, the lighting's not right. I didn't do my hair right today. All of these things can hold us back. And I'd say, hit record and go. I talk about this sometimes with people, but maybe I don't talk about it enough. I was using my microphone backwards for the first 30 episodes. So I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't doing it perfectly. And yet many of you have told me that you really connect with those episodes. And so I want to tell you, yoga teacher, do some B- work and see what happens. That is what we decided to do with the podcast. and we get better each and every time our entire team learns. This year, 2020, has been a year of learning together and messing up as we go. And I want to say, as a society, not just here over at the podcast team. Also, we've hit some huge milestones. Soon we're coming up to 4 years of podcasting, 200 episodes, as I said, and our Facebook group is now at over 10,000 yoga teachers from around the world. If you're not already a part of our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group, come and find us over there. There is such support and good information shared in there each and every day. I'm just blown away by the community that has grown in there. Here's another thing I've learned about 2020. I can have a plan and it will change. And this is exactly what happened in this podcast episode. I'm so excited about this mother-daughter duo in today's episode that you get to hear from both Judith Hanson Lasater and Lizzie Lasater, her daughter, all about their yoga journey, parenting, and running a yoga business. But that is not what I intended at the very start. I wanted to talk about Judith's book. Many of you already know and have heard of Judith. She's well known in the yoga world. She's one of the leading yoga teachers in the US. She's been teaching yoga for over 50 years and has authored 10 books, including the latest one, Yoga Myths, What You Need to Learn and Unlearn for a Safe and Healthy Yoga Practice. I love this book. I had it in my hands for about a week looking at it. My mom stopped by. We had an outside visit while she was in the area for an appointment. I waved the book at my mom and was like, look who I am interviewing. I was so excited. And she was like, can I borrow the book? And it's still over at my mom's place. My mom is also a yoga teacher. And that's how good it is. One look at it and she was like, please, can I borrow it? She told me the other day, I will get that back to you. And I said, would you like me to order you a copy? Because I will. She was like, she sat for a moment. I was like, just keep it as long as you want and just let me know if you want your own copy. So in this interview, we dig into what it was like for Lizzie growing up with a yoga teacher for a mom and how that has influenced her in the journey of teaching yoga and running a yoga business. Judith and Lizzie also talk about their own personal experiences with parenting and why we all struggle with the idea of perfectionism and not being able to be quote unquote perfect parents. This is an incredible interview about how yoga relates to parenting, perfectionism, and your own practice from the unique perspective of a mother-daughter team. And I'm so excited that I'm able to share this with all of you listeners for our 200th episode. Oh my gosh. If you don't mind, just do a little happy dance all around there. I'm doing a happy dance in my new chair. Remember that all of our show notes are ready for you at theconnectedyogateacher.com/200 for today's episode. If you would like to give us a happy 200 episode gift, a review is the best way to do that. Oh my goodness. I love to read the reviews, and we try and read one out on the podcast when we get them. So make sure to leave your name, maybe where you're from, and maybe what your yoga business is called in that review so I can give you a proper shout out. I also want to give a huge thanks to our sponsor, Schedulicity. Oh my goodness, Team Schedulicity. As I'm recording this, you're getting ready to gear up for this big event where you're really giving back to the community. You've asked me to come and share some really easy ways that we can find moments of mindfulness. Connected Yoga Teachers, Schedulicity is a company that really cares about people. This year, they've done some amazing things. They paused payments for people. They gave away Schedulicity Cares grants. They did so many things for our yoga teachers and their other customers. If you are looking for a scheduling software, definitely check out Schedulicity. Tell them that you heard about them from the podcast and see if it's a good fit for your business. Here's our hot tip of the week from the team over at Schedulicity.
Hey Connected Yoga Teachers, this is Shannon with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Successful full-time yoga teachers have a lot to deal with before they even hit the mat. Marketing, processing and tracking payments, checking people in and trying to make sure they all fit, accounting, keeping up with email correspondence and social media campaigns. You may feel like you need a personal assistant, or maybe you just need Schedulicity. You've spent hundreds of hours learning how to teach others to manage the complexities of their minds and bodies. Let Schedulicity manage the complexities of your online scheduling and marketing. You deserve a few hours to yourself.
Alrighty, let's dive in. First of all, let me introduce Judith Hanson Lasater, who is a Ph.D. and physical therapist, along with a yoga teacher who has had a long and illustrious career in the yoga industry. Judith started teaching yoga in 1971 and was an early disciple of BKS Iyengar in 1974. She helped found a nationally known yoga teacher training program in San Francisco, which has trained thousands of teachers, and in 1975, she collaborated with other yoga teachers to start the Yoga Journal magazine. Judith's specialty is restorative yoga, but she has also trained novices and teachers alike in asana, pranayama, meditation, anatomy, kinesiology, yoga therapeutics, and yoga philosophy. Lizzie Lasater learned yoga from her mother, Judith, and now teaches restorative yoga teacher training globally via her virtual platform. In addition to sharing her work through live online events, curated digital trainings, and her Sunday Shavasana series newsletter, Lizzie also has a heartfelt spirit jewelry collection. Lizzie is a strong believer that we are already Buddhas. We just don't know it yet. Together, Judith and Lizzie share a variety of courses such as Living Your Yoga, Yoga Myths, Shavasana Intensive, and more on their combined online platform, lasater.yoga. So let's meet Judith and Lizzie and dig into this interview that went in a totally different direction than planned, and I think you'll see why. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Judith and Lizzie. It is so great to have you both here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I'm excited because I want to dig into and talk about your brand new book to me anyway, Judith. But I also have so many questions. I'm actually not even sure where to begin. I think one of the big questions I have is for you, Judith. What does it feel like? I think your yoga teacher birthday is coming up, 50 years of teaching yoga. Is that right?
Next July.
So what does it feel like? And what do you see as happening in the yoga world right now?
Well, some days it feels creaky on the mat. And I feel creaky. And other days I feel like it was only yesterday. I feel a lot of gratitude that I made what I call in my life the most important right-hand turn in my life, when I turned off the sidewalk to the right and walked in the YMYWCA and asked for a job there when I was in graduate school. And they looked at me in stunned silence and said, "We just decided in our meeting to hire a program associate. How did you know?" And I'm like, my intuition told me to. I didn't say that, and they had yoga and I got to take it and took my first class and got up and practiced the next day. It's like literally a door opened and I walked through it. But I'd like to kind of take your question, if I may, and kind of shape it to this situation being here with my daughter. People have always asked me, did you make your kids do yoga? And I say no. Just because they have the misfortune of being born to me doesn't mean that they should have to do yoga, because yoga is life-changing, soul-changing, body-changing practice, but its power is predicated upon choice and intention. So I hope that they would choose to have some kind of introspective practice and meditation, kind of thing, because I think we all as human beings need that for our own sanity and our own growth and development. But it is way beyond my dreams. I never even dreamed that I would have a daughter who grew up and went to architecture school and used her design talents to help us do our yoga presentations and to teach, and who studied with me and we get to do things like this together. So I knew I wanted to be a yoga teacher very soon in my acquaintanceship with the practice of yoga. I loved it, everything about it. But I could never have predicted that I would do it for the rest of my life. This was my profession, but I could never, ever predict that Lizzie would grow up to be my business partner, my daughter, my companion on the yoga journey. And that, to me, is one of the things I'm the most grateful about my yoga practice in my life. It brings me a lot of joy.
Oh, Mama.
That's amazing. That's so
Yeah.
sweet.
Tuesdays are my day to be nice. After that, you're in trouble.
I feel like, just to respond briefly, Mom, that's so sweet of you to say. I feel like, Shannon, it's almost the opposite for me, that yoga was such a background music of my childhood that I never decided to become a yoga teacher. It all just feels like it sort of unfolded in this very unexpected way. And I did have a very strong yoga adolescence where I went and studied with Matthias Rotti in Los Angeles and did my first teacher training almost again by accident with her, just because I loved spending time with her. And she announced it was her last teacher training. And I remember saying, I want to take this 8-week summer teacher training course just for me to deepen my practice, but I really don't think I'm ever going to teach. And then it just unfolded, I have really loved working with you, Mom, in the combining of getting to produce these online courses together and teach workshops together, but combining, like you said, my design interest and production work with this vast body of knowledge and fascination that is the practice of yoga.
I love that both of you brought this whole, where your yoga journey started and the fact that you both work together. So I was just watching you two on YouTube because I had gone to your website, Judith, and clicked on like anatomy question of the day. And I thought, I wonder what this is. And it was the most adorable thing to watch the two of you talk about yoga and talk about much more than yoga. Yoga poses. You were demonstrating a yoga pose, but to talk about some really deep stuff in a quick amount of time. I'm curious. Well, first of all, I have a question about children. Judith, how many kids do you have?
3,000 sometimes, but actually 3.
3. Okay, so I also have
like 3,000 when they were growing up in some moments.
And Lizzie, you have 2 twins.
I have 1-year-old twin boys, yes.
Yeah, which I bet feels like 3,000 at some time.
We have an abundance of children, is what I say to my husband.
They have a barrel of monkeys, is what they have.
Aww. And so I have 3 children as well, and I did yoga from when my youngest was a year old. That's when I became a yoga teacher. And I'm so curious, out of your 3 kids, did you ever have a time, like one of my kids turned to me once and said, could you just do a real job, like be a teacher or work at the bank or something? Why do you have to do this whole yoga thing? Did you ever have this with your kids, or did they ever kind of rebel or move away from yoga in this way?
I was sneaky. I did a couple of things that I hoped would not turn them off yoga. I couldn't get them, I don't want to make you do yoga or grab someone off the street and make them do yoga. So I'm not going to try to make my children do yoga, as I said before. But I had a couple of sneaky things that I did. And one was when I would go to teach my yoga class, for the evening, and there'd be a babysitter usually. And I would say, Mommy's going to work. I never said I was going to go teach my yoga class, although they knew that on some level. Come push me out the door. And they thought it was so fun to have the power. I wasn't leaving them. They were pushing me out.
That's brilliant.
I did that. Yeah. And then when I started, was very active in their school that went from pre-K through 8th grade. And I was president of the lower school, like PTA once, in the middle school PTA type organization twice. I was there. It was a private school and they did tours and I helped on the tour. So I was around there a lot. And when I was there, I remembered that I was there as Miles, Cam, and Lizzie's mom. So I didn't really talk much about what I did. And people, like after I'd been at the school 5 or 6 years, came up and said, "You're a yoga teacher. I read about you in the yoga journal, or something," because it was their place. But I wanted that was primary. And I made that conscious decision that I was not going to be about me. It was going to be about them. And like I think somebody at one point was teaching a little yoga to some of the kids. And like, I didn't say, "Oh, let me help you," or "I do yoga," or anything. I just stayed completely out of it. But I do remember, and it's Lizzie, and I think she would not mind if I told this a little bit of a story, is that, she would say a similar thing, like, "And don't pick me up, please, after play practice, and don't wear that blouse, and don't play that radio station, and don't talk about yoga."
Yeah. Yoga was like embarrassing back then. You have to remember, this was before Madonna found yoga.
Everything is embarrassing when you're in the 7th grade. Just the fact that you have parents is embarrassing. But that's the kind of answer I have for you. I hope that is what you wanted to hear, because that's what I got.
That's amazing. I love it so much. Lizzie, can you remember anything from that other than feeling like, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing? Because I think it's true no matter what. Like, we look at other people's parents when we're teenagers and we think, why can't my parents be cool like that? Meanwhile, those kids are looking at our parents thinking the same.
Yeah, it's been an ironic role reversal, because certainly when I got into college and older, my friends have started to, read mom's books or come to workshops. One of my best friends, my childhood best friends, now comes every summer to a retreat we do in Montana at the Featherpipe Ranch and takes mom's classes and loves them. So, I mean, such a full circle moment. But I do remember at that age, 12, 13, 14, just being more focused on telling people like, "Oh, my dad's a lawyer. That's like a normal job. You can understand." And my mom like teaches yoga.
Lizzie, do you remember one of her roommates from college, undergraduate school, kind of got turned on to my work, and she was reading. I was on Twitter for a while, and then once Twitter got to be nasty, I got off. I was pretty much following my kids and the Dalai Lama, but then it got to be sort of a nasty thing, and I got off Twitter. But I was on Twitter for a while, and I just put a little saying out. And one day Lizzie called me up and we were talking, and she said, "Oh yeah, I talked to so-and-so. I don't want to say the name, the friend." And she said, "Mom, it's really annoying when my friends quote you back to me." I just thought it was funny and fabulous.
But on a serious note, I think what mom did well was modeling that she practiced every day in the morning before breakfast. That was her thing. And that it was just matter of fact. There was no big ceremony about it. It was just part of our lives. And it became this fabric that it's like when I went into a yoga studio in Munich a few years ago. It didn't have a shop or anything. It was just one of those, you go in, you take off your shoes in a little ante room, and then there's a wood, it's an Iyengar studio. And then there's like a wood floor room. And I walked in and I said, "Oh, it smells like my childhood here." Like, so that's what I mean. This yoga was just the background and considered completely sort of normal and taken for granted. And I think mom did a really good job of not forcing us, but it was always available. So if and when we showed interest, "Sure, come do this with me," or, "Oh, I'll show you a pose for your tight hamstrings," or, it was just very loose. And in a similar way that I think mom, you thought about vegetarianism, like my sense of mom's motto, and it's definitely now going to be my motto with my kids with vegetarianism, is like, "I don't buy it, I don't cook it, but y'all do what you want." Like, there's no lecturing or shame. It's like, but I'm just not buying it and I'm not cooking it.
Right.
When you were probably 3, and I had to go to work, and one of my sort of senior assistants, yoga students, was babysitting you. And she asked you if you did asanas, poses, and you said, "No, I do trauma yama."
Do you remember that, Lizzie?
No.
There's no way, she was so young. And I said, I do trauma yama too sometimes.
This is so great. I love the fact that you said it was just there. It was just in the fabric. Like it wasn't something that was like, all right, now the whole family's going to do yoga together. Like that never would have worked in my household for sure. But both my partner, Sean, and I do yoga, and the kids would be like, how quickly can I crawl underneath your downward dog or something like that? Like they'd be all over when they were younger. Yeah. So what is it like now to work together? Because I don't know who said it. A teacher of mine heard it from a teacher of his. If you really want to practice yoga, go hang out with your family.
Lizzie?
Well, for me, I really enjoy working with you, Mom, as a partner. Mom is just like a great person to collaborate with in just the sense of every time I send an email, it returns with a better idea, or Mom will have moved the ball forward on the project, as opposed to those people we have in our lives where you send an email, it languishes for weeks and then returns with more work for you. So just on a kind of almost transactional level, like Mom is wonderful to work with. And I have so enjoyed, I sometimes call it like doing business via emoji, because our online work, which is all under www.lasater.yoga, we do these online courses together. And then we've done, like you mentioned, the YouTube videos and branching out from there. Now during COVID, we're doing a lot of online workshops together, live workshops. But for me, it's like doing that work is just working with someone who not only is Mom at such a high level, I think, an expert in the material at hand, but she's just so easy to work with. And because our whole work is basically the two of us, doing business via emoji means I can send her a text. Here's an idea of something I want to do. And because it's a family business, there's the trust and respect there. Like Mom will just send a thumbs up emoji back, and it's like that project is now moving forward. So as opposed to, projects we've done involving larger corporations or bigger groups of people, in yoga and in my previous life as an architect, like it's just painful for me now to work with big groups of people via long email chains where everyone has to give their opinion and nothing happens.
Right. Oh, that's so good. I love it. Just a quick thumbs up means let's go forward. What do you think, Judith?
I'd like to weigh in a slightly different vein. I wrote a book many years ago called Living Your Yoga, and I told a lot of stories about my kids and what they taught me. And it has been my inclination for as long as I can remember to have the idea that, and the way I say it in a kind of funny way, is what are they going to put on my tombstone? We miss her so much. Her hamstrings were so loose. I mean, what is the point of this practice on the mat, this pranayama, this meditation? If it has no effect in the world. In other words, if I don't, as a practitioner, begin to embody the teachings of yoga, eventually we become the yoga. And when we start out, we are the container that catches yoga, like the empty bucket catches the rain. We have moments. And I think as we practice over the decades, we are moving toward becoming the yoga. And so if that is true, then everyone is Buddha or no one is Buddha. Everyone is the Atman. Everyone, regardless of the fact that they are my genetic offspring. And so I endeavor, just because she's my daughter, to remember that she is also Buddha. And I think when we have that embedded sense that we treat everyone the same, everyone with respect, first and foremost, I love her unconditionally, but I don't take advantage or attempt not to take advantage of the mother-daughter relationship in our work, because I want to live my highest values. And For me, the yamas and the niyamas, which people always call the 10 commandments of yoga, are not proscriptive of what we should or shouldn't do. They are descriptive of what how an integrated person lives. And I think if we are not pointing our compass toward integration of the practice, beginning with ahimsa and satya, and if we are not endeavoring to live those in all our relationships, then we're just standing on our head, and it has no relevance.
This is so good. I love the analogy that you shared of the being like the bucket and gathering that water. I feel like it made me think that you've been gathering this yoga for a long time, and that we can all do this, and also that you're looking at everyone as also equals. I want to dig a little bit more into this because part of me gets really bothered by this idea that you meditate and then you move up this ladder of, I'll be more enlightened, or, oh, that, that person is voting that way or doing that thing because they are not more enlightened. I don't know if either one of you want to speak to that.
Let me try a little bit. What I have found is that if I move away from this understanding that everyone is already enlightened, there's just a little more clouds, the more I move away from that, the more I suffer, the more unhappy I am. And the more I open to that concept, the more surprises and joy come into my life. And I'll tell you, one of the first big times I ever had that lesson was a long time ago. And my husband had gone to law school and was now out of law school and got a very, I will say modestly, a prestigious clerking job in San Francisco with a very well-known judge. And if you clerked with that judge, you always got a really good job afterwards because he was very picky anyway. So, and then he had a command performance once a year of all his past clerks who were still in the area. I mean, you did not go there because you might be in his court the next morning. He would take it out on you, So I was at this stage, we were living way away from the downtown life, and I was wearing my Birkenstocks and, doing yoga and had my long straight hair parted in the middle kind of person. And so I put on my grown-up clothes and I went sort of begrudgingly down there, and I thought, what am I going to have to say to all these people? They smoke, they drink, they eat meat, like I can't relate to them. Right? Can you imagine that?
Yes.
So
yes, I can.
I'm going in the party and I'm not really sitting there with my, crossing my arms and lifting my chin up but I was attitudinally like, okay. So I plopped down on the couch and this, dressed in a suit, young lawyer sat down behind next to me. This was in like the mid 80s maybe, or earlier. Anyway. And he said, what do you do? And usually in those circumstances in that era, I would say, well, I'm a physical therapist and I teach relaxation and stretching. And they'd say, oh, that kind of sounds like yoga. And then we'd talk, But if I just said yoga, a lot of times people just say, oh, and turn away at parties because they didn't relate. So he said, I knew what he did. He was a lawyer. And he says, well, what do you do? And I just thought, okay, here it comes. And I just turned at him and almost as a challenge, I said, I teach yoga, want to make something of it. And he just looked at me and he said, I've studied yoga. My ears, pricked up. I'm like, really? Where? In India. Whoa, now my whole body turns toward him. In India, who did you study with? And he turned and looked at me and said, Krishnamacharya. This is my guru's guru. The universe laughing at me like, you go in, and it just taught me you never know. Like, we cannot judge people from the outside. We can hold them accountable for their actions. There are people who need to be put in jail, treated, fed, and medical care, and not hurt, not being cruel to them. But I'm not saying that. I'm not saying everything that everybody does is wonderful. I'm saying that we cannot judge people. Well, if we do, for me, let me put it this way. When I have found myself doing that, I did it yesterday, and it's the same exact thing happened. It's like the universe has been telling me for a long time and teaching me this lesson that everyone is Buddha. And I've had the most amazing conversations with taxi drivers, with a man who came to fix my printer, and he saw an Indian goddess on the wall. And we had this incredible talk about the Vedas because he was Indian. And he was the printer installer of my, so I like that lesson, and I endeavor to remember it, whether it's the clerk behind the counter at the airport, whatever an airport is, I've forgotten, but the person at Whole Foods checking me out, or the security guard outside, or, as much as I can, keep my heart open, because everyone is imbued with divinity, or no one is.
Right. All of us, all or none. This is good. Lizzie, did you feel this as you were growing up? Or do you have anything that comes to mind in your own life in this?
Well, what I wanted to chime in on was thinking again about working together with Mom. And I don't know, Mom, if you think there is a grounding in the sort of philosophy of yoga. You mentioned the yamas and the niyamas, but for me, one of the things I think works well with us working together is I certainly have a very clear sense of boundaries, or sort of, like roles. So it's very easy for me to say, like, okay, Mom, like now we're having a conversation as partners. And for my business partner, I'm always available. If it's 9:00 at night and there's something important, of course I'm going to pick up and be ready to talk to you about it. But if it's 9:00 at night and it's my mom calling who wants me to tell her about how the twins are doing, I can easily and with clarity say, no, I'm sitting on the couch right now with my husband drinking a glass of red wine. I'm not available as your daughter. And I think we have an easy shorthand and clarity around when we're working and then when we're in our other relationship role.
This is so good.
And, for me, I like to have that boundary. She says, Nico and I are sitting here on the deck, looking at the sunset. And I go, okay, let's talk tomorrow. It's not that important. Or I'm going to send you a text about something we need to talk about tomorrow. Bye, have fun. So it's, it's the equivalent of just, if she were close enough, just like going over to her house without calling her. Like, I don't have those boundaries because I think it makes for better relationships, and it would never show up at her house without letting her know, asking her if I can come. But it spills over into the teaching of yoga. And it's an issue that is really up in the Me Too era. But for me, it's always been up. So when I teach my Relax and Renew courses, I have a level 1 and a level 2. And in the level 2, the first day, I ask them this question. All right, I make this statement, and then I want them to think about it and write something about it or talk about it the next day, is that the most important thing as a yoga teacher is not, the most important question to begin with is not, what am I going to teach? The most important question is, what is going to be the relationship I have with my students? Because teaching is a relationship. And in the traditional times, it was one-on-one. Now we do classwork in the modern area, groups of people. And now we have people that are thousands of miles away from us. I mean, it's amazing. Soon we'll be teaching people on the moon. But that is the question. And again, to me, what has happened over the decades is that this merging of my practice life and my so-called personal life and my professional life, merging in the sense of my values are of respect and boundary and clarity in my speech, and the willingness to be present, eat with you if you call me up, and Shannon, and say, I really want to talk to you. And I would have the clarity to say, I really want to talk to you, but right now I'm exhausted. I need to have a boundary about my own well-being. Or, after class, when someone comes up to you and looks at you, and people are starting to leave, and you're thinking about getting home and eating your baked potato, and you're tired, and you've taught 2 classes, and it's 8:00 or 9:00 at night, and they start the conversation. It was a dark and stormy night.
Right.
And you just don't want to stand there and talk to them. So that I've learned that the respect for me, the boundary I have with my daughter, with you, with my students, is I say, I really hear that you want to talk to me, and I want to talk to you, but I need you to hear that I'm so tired right now, I'm unable to give you my full attention. Can we make a plan to talk over the phone tomorrow or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them the truth. Right now I'm unable to give you my full attention, because that's what they want. Because what happens is they start telling us, we step back, they get louder, they start the story over, and it's not living satya. And I tried with my children also. See, all of this to me is in the same cauldron. It's like when they would ask me any question, whatever question it was, I tried to answer it in an age appropriate way, because they came up with this question. It was something important to them. And I wanted them to learn that they could ask me anything, and I would tell them what I believe to be the truth about that in age appropriate way.
Right.
So that's what I guess over my decades of practice, if I had to distill what I've learned, is that there is no separation. There is no separation between body, emotions, mind, soul, and divinity. It's all interwoven. There is no separation. And in fact, the belief in separation is the root of all suffering. So for me, my great hope is that the tracks I leave in the sand, the samskaras I've created for myself, and the tracks I've left in the sand and the impressions I've left will resonate maybe just a little bit in ways that help other people have less suffering in their lives. And that includes my daughter. That includes you.
But I think, Mom, it's also important for us. I mean, this is very lofty stuff, and I know you feel this deeply in your heart, but I think it's important we don't hold ourselves up, especially when we're in those householder years with kids and careers and, partners and all of the chaos.
You mean the insanity years?
And the pressure that all of that brings to bear, that we don't, as yoga practitioners and especially yoga teachers, kind of hold ourselves to the standards of the yamas and the niyamas, or some level of perfection. And that we think, like when you say it's all in the same cauldron or the same pot, what degree do I want to be constantly asking myself or interrogating myself, like, about my parenting in relationship to my practice? If I'm not parenting with satya in this moment, or showing up for my kids the way that if I'm just like giving them to a babysitter and running away for an hour.
Yeah, but I can't take them anymore.
Yeah. Like, where do you see that pressure because I think yoga attracts or, sort of develops a sense of perfectionism that many of us have. Yeah.
It can, but I love this thought. Here's what I have learned to do. I did the perfectionist thing. I timed my headstands. I timed my shoulder stands. I did the perfectionist thing, and that didn't really work. Perfection is not discipline. Discipline is consistency, not harshness, not difficulty. It's consistency. And what the residue of the practice leaves, to me, is a habit, whether it's asana pranayama meditation or studying the sutras or whatever form of practice we take, leaves a residue in my nervous system. which allows me to be aware of the thoughts that are arising in me. Because that step backward, oh, here I am trying to be the perfect mother. How human of me. The empathy and acceptance. I said this a long, long time ago and haven't really said it in a long time out loud, but the more we accept our humanness, the more we claim our divine right, our divinity, the more we welcome our divinity, that ability to, but the practice gives us that freedom of space between thought, between identity with our personality, our ego, and the thought that's arising. Right now, I'm irritated at my daughter because she's being a classic teenager and I want her to be different. Oh, yeah, I remember being a teenager. My mother got in trouble. She was born in 1918. She got in trouble with her mother when she wore lipstick. And I remember being in college and we wore no makeup, the long straight hair, hippie age. And so her mother was on her case all the time saying, you should be wearing lipstick. You look like a loose woman. And my mother was on my case. Can't you wear a little lipstick? And that was always something that I held, as an important lesson. And so, yes, Lizzie, you and I can get into make the list, do the job, perfectly done, house is clean, children are burnt, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a bigger container within which to hold all my self-judgments, my relentless self-judgments, my list of things. That class wasn't good enough, that dinner wasn't good enough, that podcast I just did, I wasn't articulate enough, all of those. The key to letting go of those, as you well know, this is not my thought, just passing the bucket to you, is to maintain the awareness of the arising of thoughts. And the space we feel between, the distance we feel between our thoughts / beliefs, which are just thoughts put together in an organized structure, and our deeper self, that is the measurement of our freedom, an exact measurement of how free we are. The closer they are, the less freedom, the more suffering, the further they are. And that's why we practice. Not to be perfect, the mind is going to keep doing it, but it just doesn't bother me that it does it so much anymore. Oh, there it is, going off on that judgment trip again. Okay, inhale, exhale.
Judith, do you think that there's a lot more pressure now on parents to be this perfect? Because I felt it through books. And now there's this whole element of social media that didn't really exist. Like Facebook was just coming in as my kids were getting older.
I think Lizzie should answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah. I read recently that it's a trend. It's certainly not the only story. There are many, many paths to parenthood, but there is a trend that I find myself in of people waiting later to have their first child and more consciously or very consciously choosing that child. I was 35 when I got pregnant and my partner was 42. So we had a lot of life experience, and we had also gone to graduate school, for example, and, sort of coming from a place of looking at children as a project, and I'm used to being good at projects. And so I'm going to now turn the bright light of my trained intellect towards this new project, and we're going to go, as if it is something that requires the same set of skills that have made us successful in other parts of our maybe career life or educational life. And I'm finding that it's so much more full mind, body, spirit than any of the books I read sort of led me to believe. And I'm also finding it's such an interesting process with my relationship with my husband and kind of us going through this experience together. We talk about, we have this kind of emerging idea that I can't actually choose how to parent, because all I can try to do is change myself and then hope that the kid in a mirroring neuron magic will respond. But it's nonsensical in some ways for me to read in a book like a parenting philosophy. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. It's like I am just fully reacting in this three-dimensional way to the dynamic in my house with these two babies and my husband. Like, I'm not working on like high level philosophy. I mean, I do think books can be helpful for very tactical things. Like, it's great to give your kid a bath before bed because it soothes them, like these things, or play white noise when they're very little or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. But the books that are more about like the philosophy of how to raise your children, I'm finding to be so bizarre.
Yeah. I hear you on this, and I want to call in this quote that I heard your mom say in the video where you two were on YouTube together. It was about yoga, but I feel like it has to do with each child that you parent. Judith, you said, I like to teach people first and asana second. And I feel like it's kind of the same thread with children. Like, I feel like you have to meet them all where they're at. And, you know, my youngest is 15 now, and I feel like now I'm just starting to get good at this.
I agree. I think it's like, sometimes I think it's like communism. It's like every kid is going to get as much as possible from me, but I have different expectations from my twins who are exactly the same age. Like Felix, buddy, like you're climbing up the stairs on your own. Otto, all right, I'm going to carry you because I know that you're cranky and tired and you're not as, it's just like, but Felix, no, hop up, let's go. Like already I have different expectations of them in different moments. Like, teaching people, not poses.
Judith, do you have anything to add to that? As watching, like as a grandparent now.
Oh, grandparenting. That just skip the parenting part and go straight to grandparenting. That's what You know what though? I think, I had my babies one at a time, and the first one I was so, wanting to do the perfect job. And somebody just told me, just be a good mom. You don't have to be a perfect mom. Kids are resilient. But, it was a big deal. Like, should we use the pamper? We got a diaper service, which we like because we have a cloth diaper, like everything was this big decision. And I remember when my first kid was sitting up and crawling around, and he got fascinated by Kleenex box. And he found the Kleenex box, and he would pull one out, and then he would just look like, I pulled it out, it's still there. And he'd pull the next one, the next. And so we were hiding the Kleenex boxes, and we were like, oh, this was such a pain. And by the time Lizzie came along, I said, give her a Kleenex box. I want to see what she does. we softened. We became less concerned about the decisions, the small decisions. It was the consistency of them having their 3 meals a day, their hug at night, putting them to bed, the consistency of our presence and telling them we love them and showing them we love them, because love is an action, not just a feeling. It was that by the time we had the third one, I'm sure you found that, and Lizzie is finding, and will find it even more, that they're going to be okay. And we need to just know when to say it's your turn to go to bed and I'm going to have dinner with my husband or my friend, or, we need to feed ourselves and not just them. And so for me, I realized that I had made a huge switch when I started out being a yoga teacher who had a kid, because I was already a yoga teacher. I was a yoga teacher who had a child. And then one day I was a mother who taught yoga. And that balance, if I had not enough time with my children, I felt uneasy. But if I never went and taught a class where I just thought about teaching and my love of yoga and helping the students and being with adults, I had to keep that balance. For me, yoga teaching actually was a fabulous profession because I could sort of choose when I taught, depending on their age, or when they were really young, I would teach at night, 2 classes, not 6 blocks away, and they would have their routine, and the babysitter would give them dinner and bath and bed and that kind of thing. But then when they got older and they were in school all day, I only taught in the day, because then if I taught at night, I wouldn't see them. And it was very important to see them for dinner.
Exactly.
So I hope that helps.
It does. I think it's so much like you figure it out. And I love how you gave this story of like, let's see what she does with the Kleenex box. My third child, like my first, I was really worried about germs and everything, he was touching. And then by the third, I remember the two boys saying, "She's eating dirt." And I was like, she'll be fine.
Oh, that's the dog's ball. Okay, here, take it anyway. And for me, my youngest, Lizzie, is the most easygoing of the three.
Right.
Because I was more easygoing.
Mm-hmm. Do you think then, like what I'm hearing is years of parenting experience gives you this different perspective. Do you feel this, Judith, in your book that you just wrote of like, do you feel like, oh my gosh, I have all of this knowledge as a yoga teacher for almost 50 years now and as a physical therapist? Was that some of writing this book? Like, I feel like it's really laid out. Like, here are the things that yoga teachers really need to stop cueing and saying and doing.
My Yoga Myths book?
Yes.
This is how I think of Yoga Myths. It's 12 chapters. The last one's questions and answers. And then there are 11 chapters on different topics. And the first one is Stop Tucking Your Tailbone. And I try to use titles that are sort of, what? Make the reader go, what? I wrote the book not to tell everyone what they were doing wrong, because that's not the way I teach and that's not the way I think. I wrote the book because I wanted to say, hey, here's something that I've learned academically, and I've learned in my body, and I've learned by seeing it with thousands of people. And it really seems to work. See if it works for you. I'm offering it to you. Taste the spinach, experiment.
Yeah. And it's so clear. I love all of the chapters, like, why you don't need neck rolls, but you do need blankets for shoulder stand, or free your pelvis and spine. I mean, I love to talk anything pelvis. And these are some of the huge questions that yoga teachers have.
Yeah.
I feel like I wish that this book was around when I became a yoga teacher. Lizzie, what are your thoughts on teaching yoga for less time than your mom and then seeing this book?
So I think of it sometimes as the yoga industrial complex, what we've created in the United States. And that includes, the kind of puppy mills teacher training programs that are just pumping out 200-hour certifications, which I celebrate that people want to deepen their relationship with yoga. But I think it's not always clear to those students that this 200-hour is the very first step in a long education process to becoming a skilled teacher. And so in order to teach people, a large group of people, efficiently and repetitively, this kind of 200 hours of information, I have seen that get distilled into one concept, for example, called cueing, which is kind of a word for memorizing. And it's not really the student teachers, like the new teachers' fault. They're being bombarded with this huge amount of information. And as a way of breaking it down and making it seem learnable and accessible, many styles or schools have developed this idea of cueing. But what happened for me when I was a young teacher, when I was 22, 23 in Los Angeles teaching vinyasa classes with cues running through my mind, is that I honestly didn't feel like I was in the room when I was teaching. It was so performative and it was so based on a script and also because I was nervous and so fresh, I was not able, as mom is encouraging us to teach people, not poses, because I could barely even see those people. And so I fell back onto the idea of cues. But what this book, Yoga Myths, I think is so wonderfully does in mom's writing style, where it's very narrative. There are stories that draw us in, and she explains so well these anatomical and kinesiological principles, but in somewhat layman's terms. Like, mom is a Texas sorority girl at heart, and so she helps make it accessible to us, those of us who are not such wild anatomy nerds. But what this book does is fundamentally, I think, question some of those groups of cues or threads that run through a lot of cues, like, for example, as Mom mentioned, tucking your tailbone, which is taught in so many poses, starting with Tadasana, starting with Utkatasana, like tucking your tailbone in Utkatasana, which feels horrible. And I believe, sort of in conclusion for my little grandstanding moment here, but I think that a lot of this reflects back to the way that we're teaching teachers, and that's where the necessity for this concept of cueing evolved. Do you agree, Mom? Would you?
Yeah, I don't like the word cueing because people ask me, just tell me how to cue that. And I say no, lovingly no. In a class, I'll say, teacher training, I'll say, what I want you to do is go practice it until it becomes yours and it's intrinsic. And then when you step on your mat, you speak from your own voice, how you understand it. You don't have to remember it because you are it. It is alive in you. And the other thing that I find is sometimes lacking in some trainings is teaching the skill of observing. So in my restorative training, that's the first big overarching theme is, what do you see is going on with a student? What do you notice? Where are their arms and legs? What is their breathing doing? What is on their face? We never look at people's faces. We're always looking at their pelvis or their feet or their shoulder. The power of observation, to see the student with soft eyes and an open heart, the whole being in front of you, the alignment of the pose, the struggle, the fear, the resistance, this whole presentation that they offer up in the Socratic method, where we ask a question, because asana is a question. I ask you the question in class, Trikonasana, and you give me your answer. And then I may ask you another question. So I approach every day in my practice is how many times I've done Trikonasana, but it's a question, because it's never happened before. That the Trikonasana I did this morning has never happened before in the history of the world, and not in my life or not in the history of the universe, of this entity performing that pose. And so learning how to be observant of my own practice, what's arising, what does it feel like? And I have this voice in the book, like, turn your foot out, a little more here. How does that feel to you? Try it. See if you can feel what I'm talking about. And then take from that, from the buffet of what I offer, take what resonates with your truth, your body, your understanding. And then when it does embed itself, share it with your students, a little bit of it. And don't ever worry that you've been teaching people to tuck and standing, for example, and just disturb the normal curves. Don't go in there with a great mea culpa and apology. Just say, hey, let's try something new. They don't care. They just want someone to tell them what to do so they can just think of one thing at a time and then get to lie down and relax for 20 minutes. Like, they don't really, that's all they want.
Nice plug, Mom, for restorative Shavasana.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. I love talking to yoga teachers, and I'm so glad that we had this time to do that together.
Well, and this brings in it's been in the back of my mind, and we're in the times of COVID. We're teaching online. I see yoga teachers training, moving online a lot of the time. Lizzie, you just spoke to, that 200 hour is just the first part of learning. And sometimes we're just churning teachers out. And like you said, the puppy mill, where we just learn the cues and do the thing and we're not even there or present. And then Judith, you talked about learning how to observe and also going and doing the practice. And that's where your words would come from. So I guess this is a big question, but I'm wondering, how do you think us teaching yoga teacher training now, or having the ability to do that online, how do you think that's going to impact the level of yoga? Do you think it's possible to have a yoga teacher training all online and still have the level of understanding there in the teachers?
I've heard this term blended. I think that just online is not going to be forever, but I think maybe this suggestion that I heard recently was that teacher trainings will be blended. There'll be some pre-recorded work, some homework, the work you do on your own, and then some live in person. Because I hope that's true, because I don't ever want to lose 100% the live in person, because there is nothing like that. And I also know that all the teacher training programs I've taught in, when I've been part of the graduations, I've always said the same thing. Congratulations, you are now certified to begin learning about teaching yoga. And everyone always laughs. Like, it could be 200, 300, 500. It's never, ever done. And I want to end my answer with this story. I was in India having dinner at the home of an Indian family because one of the people I was with had stayed there in a previous trip. And I sat next to the 8-year-old daughter who was fascinated by my hair. She kept wanting to touch my hair, but because it was so different from hers. And she said, "Why are you in India?" And I said, "We're studying yoga." And she asked me, how long have you been studying yoga? And I told her whatever it was, 28 years or something. I don't remember, whatever it was. And she looked kind of perturbed, and she cocked her head and she said, "Don't you know it yet?" And, for her, she was in the 3rd grade or something. Like, you learn addition, then you go to subtraction and multiplication, and you learn it, and then you move on. And she said, "Don't you know it yet?" And I said, "No, sadly, no." And that attitude is one of the most endearing attitudes I know of, and that I have met in yoga teachers on 6 continents. I think the really excellent teacher is always curious, always learning, always wondering a little bit, just a splash of, is this the best thing for my students? And using that in a constructive, curious way to continue to learn. I learn all the time. I have insights. I keep sometimes I take a little paper in my yoga room, and I do my practice, and I have this flash or an image or a feeling or a sense, and I write it down, still learning. There are no beginning poses, only beginning students.
That's amazing.
I completely agree about our trajectory. I wouldn't want to lose the in-person transmission. I think something unnameable happens when we spend time with a wonderful teacher who sparks us. I spent 3 weeks in Greece 2 summers ago with the wonderful Shiva Ray at a training, and it just catalyzed so much energetically for me, just being in her force field. And I know that that's been the history of the transmission of yoga back into the mists of time, has been students being attracted to go spend time with teachers. So I hope we never lose that. And I will, as long as there are workshops and retreats to go to, I always have the goal of, in addition to studying with mom, trying to do, a substantial retreat or study with somebody once a year, just to deepen my own practice. But I think online has been such a gift as well, because we don't have to burn so many fossil fuels traveling around. We have access to these amazing teachers. And I think there's something to me so humbly hopeful about. Mom and I just did a restorative yoga teacher training, 30 hours live in 1 week, very intense training with Yoga Campus in London. And we had 108 students around the world. Like, there was someone in Perth, Australia live with us, someone in Singapore, someone in Hong Kong, someone in Russia.
In the Emirates, 2 people from the Emirates.
Someone in Dubai. Like, we had people and in Europe, all over the US, and all through English, through the internet, through our sort of value of yoga and learning and curiosity, coming together for this project, which is to learn how to relax and help others relax, which just to me is so optimistic about the future of humanity when I'm involved in these kind of digital learning moments. So I also hope that we won't lose that as we shift out of COVID in the hopefully very near future.
That's amazing to have both perspectives and the same perspective, really. Like, we all want to be getting back together in person for sure. And we've had some that's what a great story that is of the impact that we can have doing this online, where we're all in different places around the world and connecting in whatever way we can at this point. So thank you for that. I feel like if my listeners are now really upset because I said I was really excited to talk about the book and you didn't hear us talking about the book enough, then you need to buy it. That's what you need to do. You need to go buy the book. I will definitely talk a little bit more about it in the intro and outro when I record it. But I know, Judith, that you have a poem that you want to close out with. And I literally feel like I could sit here and chat with both of you for a very long time. I really have enjoyed this, and the time has gone by quickly. Is there anything else that you both want to share about either the book or anything that we've chatted about today?
Sure. I just wrote something very briefly on my Instagram this morning that came through during my own practice. And it's about impermanence. I've been thinking about impermanence a lot recently because my baby's just turned 1 and we just moved to a new for us old house. And there's a lot of patina and layers in this house, and just watching the kids grow so quickly. And so it is a photo of my little altar in my yoga space, but the flowers are dead. You see a Buddha and a photograph from my sister-in-law, and then these really dead lilies. And I wrote, "And then they grow old and die. These flowers I buy each week at the farmer's market. A gentle reminder that time is swiftly passing, and with it, our only chance." So that's what I've been holding in my heart recently, is just
You're such a Buddhist. What can I say?
is trying to hold into my heart, like, however tough this time is, pandemic wise, young parent wise, et cetera, like, this is our only chance. This moment, sharing it is all that we have. And I feel so grateful to you, Mom, and to the greater practice of yoga, of just having my practice, my daily practice, as a space to open up the channel for, as Mom describes, the state of gratitude to arise.
Yeah. We should never forget that the true yoga mat is always unfurled in our heart, and that we can take refuge there on our physical mat, our meditation cushion, or in our imagined one in our heart, because refuge is an intention. It's not a location. And thank God we have this practice. I can't imagine going through these last months without it. It is so much a blessing. So I have this poem now that I wrote. It's called Sweet Body. Sweet, soft body that carries my radiant soul, I do not thank you enough. I do not enjoy you enough. I do not cherish you enough. More and more now, I feel an upwelling of gratitude for all you have given me, for the ability to dance, to laugh, to weep, and to inwardly soar with the beauty of this world. For 3 babies, plump and juicy and full of spontaneous joy and curiosity for this miraculous life. For a heart that has been broken and mended more than once. For the delicious taste of love. For the many chances I have had to make mistakes and then try to learn from them. Dear body, you are the true companion of my life, the vessel of my wonder, the holder of my felt intrinsic wisdom, the container of my sacred self. Forgive me. So turn your palms away from your body, inhale your breath. Exhaling, bring your palms together in front of your heart. Namaste. May we live like the lotus, at home in the muddy water. Thank you, Lizzie, so much. Mostly for being Lizzie, but also I loved hearing your thoughtful words and having you on the planet with me. And Shannon, thank you for inviting me and Lizzie, and for all the effort and time and care and concern that you put into this podcast and your work and your teaching and your parenting and your living, because all of us together are helping us as a planet open and become and grow and evolve. And I know that a lot of what you do, Shannon, is unsung behind the scenes. And I want you to know that I appreciate it, I acknowledge it, and I recognize it. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. I just feel really like very held by both of you. So thank you. Your words are so moving. My goodness, there is such a thread of, I see it as yoga running through your family. And Lizzie, if ever you're doubting, like, oh my gosh, can I do this as a parent? Just know, like, I feel like you have such a solid foundation from that thread. So you're doing just fine. And we're all messing up all the time as yoga teachers and as parents. And we're all doing it together. So thank you both for your time today. Tell me, how can people find you and work with both of you?
So I call myself the millennial in chief for our work. So I'll let you know the links. Mom's website is judith.yoga. And mine is Lizzie, Lizzie.yoga. And that is the portal to everything. If you want to know about future projects that we're doing, and workshops and live workshops when they return, in-person workshops when they return, the best place is really to sign up for our newsletters. You can find Mom's newsletter at judith.yoga, and my newsletter is called the Sunday Shavasana series. I send it out twice a month, and I always try to include regularly goodies. Like I just sent out a 15-minute guided releasing anxiety meditation, just free stuff that I like to give in addition to letting you know about upcoming projects. So that you can find at lizzie.yoga as well. That's all I have. Did I forget anything? Oh, Mom's on Instagram. You should check out her Instagram. It's great. And her Facebook is really funny. She posts these Monday smile quotes that are jokes that have nothing to do with yoga, but it's a good relief.
Oh, that's so good. We'll make sure to link to that all in our show notes. Thank you both so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Shannon.
Alrighty, Connected Yoga teachers, I want to hear from you. And I mean, I literally want to hear from you. We have a voicemail button on our homepage. If you go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, that is the quickest way to send me a personal message. I get those and I try and reply back as quickly as I can with a voice message. I would just love to hear your take on today's episode and how you might implement this into your own world. Maybe it's with your practice, maybe it's with your teaching, maybe it's with your parenting, or maybe it's how we as just a group of people often try and make things be quote unquote perfect. Near the end of this interview, I felt like crying. I felt like Judith and Lizzie had given me such a gift of their wise words and their really open and vulnerable conversation around parenting and perfectionism and practice and learning and teaching. I was literally welling up with tears when we finished the interview. And that doesn't always happen. You know, there aren't always topics like that, but it really hit like a chord with me. And so I just want to say another huge thank you, huge shout out of gratitude to both Judith and Lizzie. And I also want to say a huge thank you to you, dear listener, because you are out there doing this work as a yoga teacher. You are impacting people. And oftentimes you don't even know it. You know, you might share some words, a poem. You might talk about building resilience in your yoga class or bring someone into a place where they feel really safe and calm. And it was important work before 2020. And wow, have we learned that this is really important work this year, especially. So as we move together into this new year, maybe you set an intention. If it feels like it fits today, what would your intention be? How do you want to feel and show up in 2021? I want to say a tremendous thank you as well to our team over here, Suzanne, Crunch, Nick, and Sinead. Thank you so much for all that you've done this year. I am so excited to see what we have planned for 2021 for our Connected Yoga teachers. I know that you are caring so much behind the scenes, and I'm really grateful for that. Connected Yoga teachers, I want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected? maybe this is a week, if you're listening in real time, where you take some time off and you rest. I know that both Judith and Lizzie would love that. So how can you stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?